Welcome to episode 58 of the FoodGrads Podcast, the podcast where we explore careers in the food, beverage, and agricultural industries. I'm your host, Veronica Hislop, a PhD candidate in molecular science and career partner with FoodGrads. This week on the podcast, I interviewed Pedro Medina, founder and chief data farmer at Haystack Data Solutions. Haystack is a certified minority-owned technology solutions provider for food and ag businesses. Since 2014, they have been committed to solving their clients' toughest challenges. Their mission is to help agri-food companies realize the power, potential, and value of data by developing effective solutions that bring growth to their bottom line, help feed the world, combat climate change, and expand opportunities for women and data scientists of color. They were also recently recognized with the Best in Baking Award at the International Baking Industry Exposition for their notable achievements that foster better plant efficiency, streamlined operations, and otherwise drive continued growth of the baking industry. On this week's episode, Pedro and I talked about Haystack and what they're doing to help food producers, processors, and distributors. Pedro talked to me about his career journey and how he got to where he is today. Because this podcast episode is themed around data, I asked Pedro about what exactly is data and how it's used in the food industry. We chatted about why we believe the food industry has been slow to adopt digital technologies and how Haystack is helping these food processors. There's a lot to unpack with this because different organizations avoid moving to the digital age for different reasons. So Haystack is helping them with different parts of their journey. Pedro particularly champions no-coding options such as those like with Kelva, which he'll explain a little bit more in the episode. We also talked about how students who are looking to go into this field of data analysis can start making a change. So enough with that introduction. Let's get on with the show. Thank you so much, Pedro, for taking time to come on the show. I'm so happy that you reached out to me, and we kind of met through non-food grads related stuff, which I found quite interesting. But once I found out what you were doing as someone who's in the sciences, who deals with data, seeing someone who's actually using data to benefit the lives of food processors and farmers and all that type of things, I was like, I got to get you on and learn more because I don't know much about how food data in that whole sphere works. So thank you for coming on the show.
Absolutely, Veronica. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you will definitely be able to do it better than I can. So let's get us started by first talking about you. And can you first tell me more about Haystack and what you do there?
Absolutely. I myself have a background as an engineer. So my formal training as an electrical engineer. I got my degree in a subset of electrical engineering called digital signal processing, DSP for short. And that is a branch of electrical engineering that uses a lot of probability, statistics, mathematics, that sort of thing. So it's not so much of the hands-on electronics, but it's really more on the mathematical side. And that is how I got my sort of foray into data science and analytics back. It's been probably close to 12 years now that I've been in this space. And approximately 8 years ago, I was leading a small team of analysts, and I decided to go off on my own and hang my own shingle, if you will. And so I founded Haystack Data Solutions back in 2014. And originally we took on and worked with a number of different industries. So we've worked in everything from heavy manufacturing to retail to ed tech and fintech and a number of other industries. But given that we are based in Minnesota, Minneapolis to be exact, an area of the United States that's often referred to as the breadbasket of America, we have a lot of food and ag companies here in the Twin Cities, which is where I'm based. So companies like Cargill, General Mills, and many, many others. And a pattern started to appear. And as a data scientist, that's what we do, right? We look for patterns in data. And I couldn't deny the data any longer. I would get a lot of work from food companies, primarily food processors and manufacturers. And about 3 years ago, we decided to go all in on this sector, given that the vast majority of our customers and clients were in this industry. And so as of 3 years ago, we have planted our flag in the food industry and haven't looked back since. And it's been a wonderful ride. It has been an incredible journey. And we have learned so much about the food industry overall, but food manufacturing in particular. And just really where that intersection of data and food, that's really where we play. And it's been great so far.
That's amazing. And one of the things I just have to jump out and talk about is that I feel like a lot of people use the word data. We're like, we're data driven, we're using data, but I feel like there might be a little bit of misunderstanding of what it is. And would you be able to talk about maybe what exactly is data, maybe as it applies to the food industry? And what's the difference between maybe data science and analyst or data analysis, if they're the same thing?
That's a very good question. And I think these days the word data science gets thrown around so much, I think it's lost a lot of its meaning. So oftentimes it's now become it's been mostly used to refer to really anyone who works in data, which can really comprise just about anybody these days. Most of us are information knowledge workers. And data is a big part of what we do. And if we're working in Excel, a lot of folks are taking on the label of data scientists and working in Excel. And you know what? There's really nothing wrong with that. It's really about how good you are at extracting valuable insight out of raw data, right? The bits, zeros and ones that are oftentimes just generating heat on a database server somewhere. And it's untapped information, untapped knowledge. And in my personal experience, having worked in this for as long as I have, and having worked with so many engineers and data scientists and analysts, that it really does take a certain mindset. It takes a certain individual who likes challenges, who likes an intellectual challenge, who likes to solve problems and puzzles, and isn't afraid of getting their hands dirty with data, right? It could be what some people would consider mind-numbing data wrangling. For a data lover like myself, we can spend hours and hours and hours just wrangling the data, trying to squeeze information and knowledge out of it, or any sort of pattern or insights that we can possibly find. So my definition for a data scientist and what comprises a data scientist versus an analyst, if you look at the traditional data science Venn diagram, which has been around for several years now, it's sort of that intersection between statistics, software development, and subject matter expertise, right? And where those three meet is really what the traditional definition of a data scientist is. I think if you subtract away the software development and the coding, you are traditionally left with what are often considered an analyst. But those lines are so blurred these days, especially because of the tools that we like to work in a lot, which are drag and drop data science platforms, which essentially give analysts the 80 to 90% of the skills that a data scientist would probably have, simply because they don't need to know how to code. Right now, if knowing how to code is a superpower, in my opinion, it's never going to go away. Coding is really a core expertise that is needed to work in this space. But the great thing is that if you're not comfortable programming, if you're not comfortable with code yet, fear not. There are tools out there that are readily available, and we work in tools that are open source, meaning it doesn't cost anything to go out and download a platform like Nime Analytics platform and some others that you can install locally, completely free of cost, connect to a source system, start pulling data, whether it be from an Excel file or a database table or what have you, and immediately start actually producing value with that data. So that's really my definition of how I would describe a data scientist versus an analyst. But those definitions are so blurred these days because the technology just keeps advancing every day.
It's amazing how much technology has come even from when I started my university career in terms of just and every year when these softwares they update, they become more friendly. There's just so much change that's happened within the past 10 years. It's really blown open the waters in terms of being able to actually interpret data. But I wanted to take a step back once again and just bring this back to the food industry, just because those who are listening, they might not actually have that much experience working with data, except for maybe the basic projects that like their teacher gives them. So when it comes to the food industry, would you be able to, maybe something that Haystack's done, but talk about where you're getting this data and maybe give an example of how you've extracted information to create a solution that's helped someone out?
Absolutely. And so bringing it back to the food industry, and especially food manufacturing and food processing. I like to break down our work in data science into three different buckets. The first is your traditional business analytics. This is everything from financial analytics, automating financial reporting, sales analytics, marketing analytics, operations analytics, those types of standard techniques and applications that apply to really any business, right? It just doesn't have to be a food business to benefit from dashboards and these types of solutions. That's what I lump under this general category that I call business analytics. There is a second category that I roughly call industrial analytics, and that is really more applicable to the manufacturing space. And given that food manufacturing is manufacturing, this is one that, I see enormous amounts of opportunity in. And what this really means is that, like all manufacturers, your production lines, they have electromechanical equipment installed on them to help automate many of the food processing. Within these electromechanical tools, you'll have these things called PLCs, programmable logic computers that can, process data, at the millisecond level, right? And so there's an enormous storehouse of data that is being generated, but not necessarily collected by food manufacturers. And what we do is that we'll come in there and we'll say, look, this is a gold mine of insight and information. And you can, as a food manufacturer, you can tap into this data to improve everything from food quality to food safety to efficiency to throughput, and even understanding how effective your equipment is operating, right? So tracking things like OEE and many of these other manufacturing metrics and KPIs that help you produce better food, safer food, faster, at greater volume, and for greater profit. And an extension of this that we're starting to get into much more these days is the whole sustainability aspect of it. And I see an enormous amount of opportunity for data science applied to sustainability, but more importantly, for the sustainable manufacture and processing of food. Food waste is a big problem that is impacting food manufacturers as a whole, but it's not just food waste. You've got wasted energy, you've got wasted ingredients, you've got wasted labor. Anything that, gets spoiled or gets thrown away or sent to a landfill is essentially wasted energy and wasted inputs. And that's wasted money for these corporations. And if you can address that food waste problem, you're not only helping build a more sustainable industry that has a less impact on the environment, but you're also helping impact the bottom line for that organization. And we see enormous opportunity in the industrial analytics as applied to food manufacturing. And then the final and third bucket is food science, right? And that's an area that you know much more about than I do. And as there's a lot of data there, right? Everything from chemical analytics to formatics and even genomics, right? So it's a very rich field with a lot of data and computational sciences being applied to it. So those are the three main buckets and that I see. And so we really operate in the first two. My plans for the future, I do see opportunities in the future where, this marriage of food science and data science combine. And so I see applications of data science in the food science space as being that next frontier. And I've got lots of ideas and things that we're currently exploring and experimenting with some of our clients in that space. But to recap, those are really the big three buckets as I see them, right? Business analytics, industrial analytics, and finally food science and the analytics that go with that.
Oh, okay. See, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you for sharing that. And as you've been talking about the different buckets of that, it's just sparking different things that, different ideas. And then first of all, I do actually find it quite surprising that considering how large the food industry is, both in the United States and Canada, of course, you have your big companies utilizing the information from their data, but you have more of a struggle for the small and medium-sized companies that you would think that there would be a more bigger harnessing of this data. They've just never had the opportunity to really have someone come in, because one of the things that you had said about tracking when I was working in quality assurance, we always had this saying, if it isn't being tracked, then it didn't happen. And a lot of times as well, when you're a small team, you're just worried about your day-to-day operations, that nothing's happening on the food safety side just from that day. But it's really hard without the tools available to have that bird's eye look from a different perspective in terms of, I love you mentioning about food safety, because we think of the basics in terms of allergen testing, making sure things are clean and that, but being able to step back, look at the overall trends, maybe identify, hey, every time on this time of the week, there seems to be a discrepancy. It's causing an issue, like pulling that data and maybe turning it into solutions that also save stress for people, because it can be very difficult to track down. If you're just relying on stories and conversations with others, it can be difficult to track down the sources of problems. So
Right.
having that additional data is very useful. Especially, of course, I shouldn't say having that data analyzed and interpreted. That's a big key there.
That's a very that's a very important point that you just made. And you're absolutely right. The smaller processors and the smaller manufacturers, in our personal experience, haven't adopted some of the more modern platforms and tools and techniques and technologies to really help them extract that value and more importantly, automate those insights, right? Because
Mhm.
a lot of that data may or may not be collected. Oftentimes, these smaller operators are probably over reliant on spreadsheets and maybe paper and pencil.
Mhm.
And that is just not really going to cut it, right? I mean, even just the regulatory pressure, FMSA and some of the other regulations that are coming online are requiring more, electronic data collection and monitoring and being able to audit that data on the fly. So traceability is a big thing, right? So food traceability and paper and spreadsheets and these things they're just not going to cut it. And what I find working with some small operators is that there's been a reluctance, right? And especially probably the food industry as a whole has been a little bit slower to adopt many of these tools. And the reasons for that are many. I'm not here to claim what those might be, but I believe that having gone through the pandemic, seeing what we're going through right now with inflation being out of control, what that's doing to the cost of ingredients. We've got food processors and manufacturers today that are having to re-engineer their products, right? Because they can't source
Mhm.
ingredients from their suppliers any longer. So they have to get much more creative. They have to be much more nimble. And how do you do that? One way of doing that is technology, right? Technology is not a panacea. It's not going to solve all of your problems, but it will make you more efficient, more effective, more streamlined. And if done right, you can automate a lot of these things, even going back to labor, right? As no doubt that labor is probably one of the biggest pain points right now in food manufacturing, especially on the shop floor, the plant floor. There's a lot of these manufacturers are just having a hard time finding enough people, qualified people with the types of skills that they need. And we're finding a lot of clients are coming to us these days and they're saying, what can we automate? What is out there that we can start using from a software perspective, not just robotics? We hear a lot about robots and cobots coming into the food manufacturing space. Obviously, other industries like the car industry and other industries they've been using robots for decades now. The food industry is very different, right? It's there are processes there that you cannot have a robot do, at least not yet. But software can automate a surprising number of processes, right? So you've got a lot of steps and a lot of processes within the manufacturing process itself, but you also have that in the back office, software, data, some of these tools that we use, for instance, just to take a very simple example, the finance department, right? Most of these businesses, like any business, is going to be slammed at month's end, trying to get those numbers, trying to get the data, trying to stitch together a storyline that is as close to accurate as possible, leveraging a ton of spreadsheets to try to get that information. We find that using some of the tools that we use, we're helping our clients deploy these drag and drop workflows that essentially automate the majority of that away. What does that mean? That means that your personnel, whether be they in the finance department or any other department, can now be using their time for more value-added purposes and more creatively. That's going to add greater value to the organization, and you're able to automate this mundane, repeatable work away using nothing but the data and software that you've already got. So we see a lot of opportunities there as well, addressing the labor shortage that's been plaguing the food industry as a whole.
That's, of course, having more automated processes in terms of just being able to, like you said, automate things. It's not just about coming in, bringing robotics, like just being able, I think, if people just take a step back for students, maybe to think about the way they go about systems in their life and like the routines and all that, these routines help save time. And when you have routines that are in the form of, so to say, a software, that can really aid in terms of freeing up space, because so much of our minds get taken up with remembering how to do like those little things like, I don't know, emailing this person, and rather having as a master to-do list and if you can have a flow, it really eases up that like brain power that you can actually start thinking of those higher level thinkings, like maybe how do we address that sustainability issue, and just really freeing up your mind. And it's great that you're able to work with these different, so to say, and be able to do that. And one of the things that I also wanted to ask was, I find that sometimes because of the type of product that's being worked with, food can be very emotional or it can be very personal. And I find that that sometimes translates to why certain businesses they are, but more so as well, like I find the whole idea of, utilizing these new softwares or utilizing new methods that are computer driven. A lot of people stick to Excel because they know how to do that. But how have you been working with clients to be able to address that, the black box of data analysis and like using these softwares? Because learning something new can be scary for people, and it takes some practice at it. So how have you been helping clients do that part?
That's a great question. And you're absolutely right. Excel is never going to go away. And I think Excel it's a fantastic tool.
It's actually very quite good.
It's an incredible tool. And frankly, probably the vast majority of businesses are run on Excel. And that's probably not going to change in the near future. What we find is that it's very relying too much on Excel it's very difficult to scale that, and it's very difficult to use this as Excel as a data source and as your primary analytics platform. That's the first thing we go in and try to help our clients solve for, is that there are other tools. And I consider myself a guide throughout the data ecosystem for our clients, because like you said before, it is constantly shifting. Every day there's a new platform. Every day there's a new technology. There's a lot of things happening, and it's very difficult to stay on top of it all. And I consider my job is to help you navigate that ecosystem and to really separate the valuable stuff from the hype and some of these technologies and tools that promise more than they can actually deliver. So one of the ways, the way that I see this sort of analytics, data science maturity occur in many of these companies is that, yep, you're going to start with Excel. I get it. And I don't discourage anyone from using the tool. It's just not going to go away. But we're not going to have you programming in Python tomorrow. That's just that's not realistic either. So what is an intermediary? And the intermediary there for us has been using drag and drop tools like the NIME Analytics platform that I mentioned before. That is completely low code, no code. All that means is that you build your analyses visually. You drag and drop what are called nodes. These are logical nodes. I like to describe it more as like Lego blocks for data science. So you just connect these little nodes together. It's a lot of fun working with data this way. It's completely, as a visual learner myself, I love the fact that you can build these visual workflows that help you understand just by looking at the workflow what the logic was that went into your analyses, and to have it be repeatable every single time. So why is that different? Why is that better in some ways than relying purely on spreadsheets? When you're working in a spreadsheet, more often than not, you're just looking at rows and columns of data. You don't know where that data came from. You don't know the logic that went into building. Sure, you can dig up the formulas. Sure, you can analyze the underlying logic within that spreadsheet, but it's not as intuitive and is not as fast. Whereas if you were to extract that logic out of that spreadsheet, simply put it on a workflow and have that workflow run automatically, meaning you don't have to search and look on your SharePoint or on a network drive where that spreadsheet's currently living and which version of it was the latest one. You've got 30 different versions of that spreadsheet floating around, and you don't know which one is the most current and the most reliable. Once you build that workflow, you automate it, you have it run on a scheduler, meaning you say, I want this insight, I want this analysis delivered every morning when I come into the office, if you are still going to the office. But essentially what you've done is that, like I said, you've extracted that logic out of the spreadsheet, you've built it once, and now everyone can connect and benefit from those insights and from that analysis. And as you're onboarding new workers, new employees, new analysts, they can get up to speed much more quickly, because instead of deep diving into a spreadsheet and trying to uncover its inner workings, you just open up a workflow visually, you read it from left to top to bottom, and you can see, okay, I connected to this Microsoft SQL Server, here, first step. Next step is I filtered out these rows, and then I did some string manipulation, or I did this, or I did that. And then finally, I send out the output from my analysis back to another spreadsheet, perhaps, maybe even a database, or just sent it out to, say, a BI platform like Power BI, which we do a lot of work in Power BI and the Power Platform. So we find that it helps these food producers and manufacturers really accelerate their insights, because now you're not working with just one or a handful of folks who might be good in Excel. Now, essentially anyone throughout the organization can open up these workflows and start connecting these nodes together visually to build a reliable, repeatable framework and analysis that you can share across the organization in really any tool whatsoever. So you're just not stuck working in that spreadsheet any longer. It can be used really anywhere throughout the organization. So we find that to be very powerful. And then finally, once you get into the rhythm of building these sorts of solutions, you realize very quickly that the sky's the limit. And the next question becomes, okay, well, we can analyze, historical data. Well, can we use any of that historical data to build a predictive model? Sure, you can. And you can do it in these tools just as well. And then as you start to mature in your capabilities, eventually someone's going to say, okay, I feel much more comfortable and confident in my skills. I want to do this in R. I want to do this in Python. I want to put this into production on some system somewhere. And all of those things become options now, whereas previously they weren't, because you were just essentially looking at it from a very narrow spreadsheet first perspective. And we try to get you away from that and show you really what else is out there that will help you accelerate your insights as an organization.
This conversation, like, now it has finally all clicked together, because prior to our conversation, I was doing research on Haystack, what you do, and I had watched your video on your YouTube channel about your no-code solution and how you were helping, I believe, one of the small processors, and you were just showing about the different nodes and clicking everything together and showing that workflow. And I'll be honest, when I was watching the video, I was like, I know that this is supposed to be simple, but just seeing it was not clicking for me. And now as I'm talking with you, you're hitting those points, and you're hitting like so many, the things that we don't realize take a lot of time, our mental energy, like something as simple as version history. You're like, which version am I? use Excel a little bit just to collect the data, but then I'll be like, is this my 7th version or did I use the 8th version for this presentation that was actually for the it's just like those little things, and that's where problems come up. That's where errors
Exactly.
happen.
Yes.
Communication problems when a person opens a read-only file, but they only save it in their computer, but they didn't upload it to the cloud, and just like those things add up, and you always want to have
Exactly.
the most update to information, and it sounds like this is helping to alleviate something like that. So it's clicking now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And really the sorts of applications that we've done, it's everything from inventory reporting to yield and throughput reporting and automating sales reports and financial reports, as I said, and even freight analysis, right? Understanding as a food manufacturer, your logistics and your supply chain, and are you paying what you should be paying for freight, or are you overpaying for freight? All of these types of analyses can now be done throughout the entire organization and be done in a way that takes days or weeks, but not months to
Mhm.
produce. And that's a game changer. And so we find that using these tools, you are able to condense your time to insight window, as we call it, by 40%. So you can literally reduce the time that your standard analyses might take down by 40%, almost half. And we find that it's a game changer for most organizations to be able to get there. And then just from an auditing, right? So in food manufacturing, auditing is a big thing. Now your data is living in one place. It's you can pull up any workflow anytime you want and say, yep, here it is. And you can showcase those insights at any time to anyone, and do so in a way that's, as I said, repeatable and secure and reliable.
Mhm.
So it's incredibly powerful, and it's a joy working with organizations that you help them as they progress on their journey, and see that the staff members are become much more data driven. The organization as a whole becomes data driven, and that can have a massive impacts to an organization.
Of course, and it just brings up the idea to me as well of just how this can help with the idea of systems thinking and systems,
Yes.
because we always think as a scientist you're trained you change one variable at a time. You change X to see how it affects Y. But that's great in science and you want to stick with it, but when it comes to organizations real world, X plus X plus Y plus Z can change Q on this day, but then you don't see that if you only changed X and then you did the next variable. Everything works as a system together, and being
Mhm.
able to have all the information coming together so you can take that step back and look at it as an overall, it really helps because there's a lot of people that's something that gets discussed in today's modern day. We have to change the food system. We have to change the food system, but that's a big issue, and how you changing one aspect might not have the direct change unless you have it combined with the other aspect. And this can
Mhm.
relate to the food processor where you have the shipping on this day can affect the safety on that day. And then unless you
Right.
have that data to step back and look to put them together, you just will never see it.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And I like your the way you position that in terms of systems thinking, right? Because a lot of it, that's exactly what it is. And having these tools, right, where and every day there's a new tool that comes online, but one thing is that they are not designed to speak with each other. And that's become
Yes.
a massive bottleneck for most organizations, right? So you've got your ERP and you've got your MES system and all these different tools, but they don't communicate with each other. And so what you wind up with is the dreaded data silo. And we find, again, going back to these tools I mentioned earlier, is that just integrating systems blending and integrating these systems together, pulling all that data, having it unified. And another thing that we do a lot of is migrating clients to the cloud, right? And early on, I'd say maybe 5 years ago, a lot of food manufacturers were very reluctant to adopt the cloud. It was a very scary. So you mean to tell me that our data, we don't have it living in on premises anymore? It's living on someone else's server somewhere, miles and miles away. It's a scary proposition, both from an access, but also a security and control perspective, right? But we find today that everybody is vulnerable. Everyone is vulnerable today for cybersecurity attacks. And we see a lot of food manufacturers being attacked. If you follow the news, there have been several meat packers who've been attacked recently,
Mhm.
some other organizations as well in the food industry. And many of these have their on-site, on-premises systems, and that did not protect them. And what we often tell is that, look, a company like Amazon or Microsoft, they have a legion of engineers working around the clock, combating and bringing forth the very best in terms of cybersecurity. So that is a value add. That is a benefit. That's an advantage to you. And everything today, frankly, is just moving on to the cloud. So it's really incumbent on these organizations, at the very least, to experiment with it. We're in a hybrid model, continue to own the majority of our data on site, but experiment with the tools and platforms that are out there. And that's another thing where it's just integrating and blending that data together, building your data lake, building your data warehouse on the cloud, having it accessible to every platform and department organizationally. And if you have a multi-plant operation, you've got your plants and your factories spread across the country or even the world, adopting these types of data technologies is a must-have. It's not really a luxury anymore. It's a necessity if you want to stay competitive. And so that's what we also help these smaller and mid-sized food manufacturers is how do you adopt and embrace modern technology and do so cost effectively, but also securely to help you get to that next level organizationally. And so that's really what we're all about.
Okay, so let's shift the conversation a little bit to focus on you. I've learned so much in terms of Haystack and in terms of that. We've been talking about that analysis piece. So let's look at the person behind it and such. And I wanted to know, with our technologies moving in a fast direction and all that, how are you? Let's focus on you. So let's talk about what skills do you use in order to analyze this data or provide your clients with the best service that you can? So, what are the skills that you have, and how have you worked on those to better improve them?
Great question. I myself, a little bit old school in the sense that I got my start in data science working in the R programming language. And let me take that back because I think R today is still just as relevant as ever. If anything, the tool has only gotten better, and platforms and IDEs like R Studio are just a joy to work in. So I love through and through. But the fact is that data science as a whole has really shifted towards Python. I think Python is by far the dominant programming language in data science today. And so early on, I got my start doing a lot of analytics in R, really cut my teeth working in R. And market forces, you have to listen to them. And so as organizationally, we began adopting more Python development. Now we have on staff a number of expert Python developers today. And also, if you want to get into the AI and the machine learning, that's going to be a requirement. You really need to learn Python. In terms of how I keep my skills sharp and what I would recommend to anyone who wants to learn data science is there's a platform called Kaggle, a very popular platform, and it's spelled Kaggle. So just go to kaggle.com, and it's essentially a platform for data scientists to learn and explore and compete via hackathons, solve problems for other organizations. So you'll have companies and organizations that will put together a challenge, they'll attach a monetary prize to it, and then you'll have teams of data scientists compete to win that prize. But the knowledge that you gain from the simple act of participating in these challenges is immeasurable. It really exposes you to really cutting edge technologies and techniques in data science and analytics. And I used to compete pretty frequently and heavily in a lot of these Kaggle competitions. I don't anymore. It has been quite a while because I'm so busy these days on managing a business. But I would recommend anyone who is serious about building their skills, you know, it's completely free. Go out to Kaggle, set up an account, and find any number of competitions. Find something that really interests you, something that you find fascinating that's going to keep you engaged every day,
Mhm.
and just compete and compete with other folks and other team members and learn from them. And you'll find that over time you'll just get better and better and better. You'll hone your skills, And you'll not only that, but you'll also simultaneously build a portfolio. So as you're out in the job hunt and then someone says, well, what have you done? Now you've got a full portfolio of projects, code, everything that you can share to showcase your skills.
No, that is amazing, and I've known with a lot of from my friend who's been in that type of sphere that some great ideas come out of it, and I know that sometimes people get full-blown businesses out of their ideas that they do at these 24-hour, like, hackathons and all those types of things or, like, those types of spheres, like, there's nothing better than being able to come together as a team, do something that's fun. It's not school related per se, so you can get a lot more into it, and you never know where it can take you and it can really push yourself. It's like a little like marathon, but for your mind in terms of building up your skills.
Exactly. That's a great way of putting it. I love that.
I know that the school that I'm at, we like to do those types of things, but it would be really cool to see more of these types of competitions come out. We need so many different ideas and ways to help the overall food system and our challenges that are being faced. So if we could have more competitions and just bringing it as a positive thing, bringing people together, I think that's something that our industry as well really needs.
I agree. I agree. And you mentioned before about how the system overall is very fractured, and freight food traceability is a great example of how
Mhm.
that is a systemic problem you're really trying to solve for, right? You've got the processor, you've got the distributor, you've got the producer, and everyone's using their own systems. Those systems don't communicate, and there's very little communication back and forth between suppliers and providers and manufacturers. And what we can do as from a data sharing, from an insights sharing, from a collaboration perspective, and having technology be that glue that permits that sort of collaboration to take place so that we are able to address these issues that are affecting the food industry as a whole. We're going to have to feed 10 billion people over the next 30 years, and it's going to be incumbent on us as members of this industry, of the food industry as a whole, to adopt every piece of technology out there that can help us get there. And data is it's gonna play a key role in all of that. Having a clear data strategy, having a way of building a data-driven organization. Digital skills are only going to become more important to the food industry over the coming years. I'm hearing it all the time these days where hiring managers are actually looking for digital skills, even from line staff and plant employees, because everything's being digitized. So if you're just acting with an HMI system on a production line, you have to have those digital skills. You're going to have to understand how to act with that platform and understand what role data is playing there. And so I think that's critical for the industry to really modernize their analytics, modernize their technology, and upskill their employees to enter into this next phase and be able to feed the world, frankly. And I think that's going to be absolutely essential.
Do you have any suggestions for students who have maybe never touched data in this the way that we've been talking, that they can maybe promote themselves on their resume or their CVs? What would be your suggestion for someone who has never done data analysis before, but wants to start dipping their toes into it?
I'm a firm believer in you learn by doing, right? We can read all day, but until you actually apply your knowledge, you haven't really done anything quite yet. And my recommendation to any student that wants to build their skills in data science and analytics is to find a passion project. I mentioned Kaggle earlier, but there are plenty of open data sets available online. There are organizations out there that ask for volunteers. So I founded one of them. I founded a group called Analyze This, crowdsourced data science. It's a meetup here in the Twin Cities where we went around to local nonprofits and said, hey, we can help you with your data. And we would gather students and seasoned data scientists to work on their problem pro bono for 3 entire months, sometimes even 6 months, and build skills and community that way. So what I would say is find a passion project. YouTube is an amazing
Mhm.
resource. And you can find hour-long training courses entirely for free on any tool. So say you want to learn Azure machine learning, if you want to do that. So how to build machine learning models in a cloud-based platform. You can Google that and sit for an hour and at least build some rudimentary skills, go out, sign up for a free account and start playing around with toy data sets. And then start looking at these other competitions, Kaggle competitions, other resources out there and see what more experienced people have done. The beauty about Kaggle is that you can actually download another competitor's code and learn from it and reverse engineer their code. And that will bring up your skill set so much faster than just having to Google it all, right? So just simply spending and saying, okay, I want to take on this challenge and say, I want to replicate what what this expert data scientist did on Kaggle. I want to do it on my own, but I want to use their code as a resource, as a guide, and simply reverse engineer it until you get it. And you just keep doing that, and you keep doing that, and before you know, your skills are going to be in demand. People are going to recognize you for what you've done and what you're able to do, and opportunities are just going to present themselves. And so, just get started. That's the best advice I can tell anybody is just get started. Find a passion project, go at it, and don't stop until you've mastered it. And then find the next thing and keep going.
I love that. And I'm going to end it there because I want to end it on a positive note. And I think that this conversation has really opened my eyes. And even I know we talked prior to this little episode, and it's really just opened my eyes to I knew data was important, like, obviously. Having the accessibility to it now to start being able to learn the tools, to get involved in a community, and there's just so many opportunities to grow, and we can really change our food system as well with as you've been doing with Haystack, and I just appreciate you coming on the show, Pedro. So before I
Thank
let you go, though, I have to
you.
ask, where can people find you, and where can we find Haystack?
Yes, you can find us online at haystackdata.com. One word, haystackdata.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn as well, so you can look me up, Pedro Alexander Medina on LinkedIn. So yeah, those are two places where your audience can find me.
Excellent. So I'll make sure to link those as well in the show notes to make it easier for everyone to find it. And once again, thank you so much, Pedro, for coming on the show. I think we have a lot to think about, and I think that this is a really exciting field for those who want to get into data and find something that can really help change the world.
Agreed. And Veronica, thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun talking to you.